Uh, the House has a responsibility to keep the government open and meet the needs of the American people. Pursuant to the United States Constitution, all appropriations bills have to initiate in the House of Representatives. The extreme MAGA Republicans are determined to shut the government down and hurt everyday Americans because they are on an ideological crusade. This is not anti-woke week. It's Project 2025 week. In fact, every week is Project 2025 week because that is the extreme MAGA Republican agenda. And we're determined to stand up for the American people. I have not spoken to Speaker Johnson today or subsequent to the collapse of the House Republican shutdown bill, but time is short. Our staffs are in communication with each other, and what occurs over the next few days will be determinative as to whether we can find the common ground necessary to fund the government, avoid a shutdown, and meet the needs of the American people. This should not be complicated. In May of last year, more than 300 members of the House of Representatives, including a majority of House Republicans, supported the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act, which set top-line spending numbers for fiscal year 2025. And we all agreed that partisan policy writers would be left out of any appropriations bills. House Republicans are violating their own agreement. Why? Because they want to jam Trump's Project 2025 agenda down the throats of the American people, and in the alternative, shut down the government. That's reckless and irresponsible. We will continue to stand up for the American people.
Would that include money for the Secret Service?
Just to follow up on Chad's question, you said you haven't spoken to Speaker Johnson since the bill on his proposal failed last night. Can you characterize more generally what your conversations with the Speaker have been on this? Are you guys on the same page about how this ultimately will end? Does the Speaker understand that this is leading towards a clean CR?
Any private conversation with Speaker Johnson will remain private. However, there's nothing inconsistent between what I may say to Speaker Johnson privately and what we are saying publicly. This is not complicated. We have already reached an agreement connected to the Bipartisan Fiscal Responsibility Act with respect to the top-line spending number for fiscal year 2025. And we will not accept any partisan, right-wing policy changes to current law. That was an agreement that we reached last year, and we expect that agreement to be kept. We are also, as House Democrats, not going to allow Republicans to cut $12 billion in funding for veterans' health care that would undermine our ability to meet the needs of veterans who are suffering painful exposure to toxic substances, burn pits, and Agent Orange. As House Democrats, we will not let extreme MAGA Republicans shortchange our military readiness to the tune of $6 billion. And we will also not let House Republicans fail to meet the needs of the American people who are suffering from the harmful impact of extreme weather events by shortchanging the American people by $25 billion. And so there's nothing inconsistent with that public position that I might otherwise say to Speaker Johnson privately.
Are you, again, willing to come to Johnson's rescue, in a sense, on this? Because a shutdown, obviously, even just a 2-hour shutdown or whatever, might very well accrue better towards the Democrats and Democratic candidates.
Our position has always been we're going to do the right thing by the American people and continue to govern in a common sense, bipartisan manner to deliver real results for everyday Americans. With respect to any future motion to vacate, our view has always been we will evaluate it on a case-by-case basis.
I'm not talking about the motion to vacate. I'm talking about coming to his rescue to keep the government open.
Well, it's not coming to Mike Johnson's rescue, which is why I was confused a bit by the question. It's coming to the rescue of the American people. That's our job. is to make sure we meet the needs of the American people in terms of their health, safety, national security, and economic well-being. Democrats have repeatedly demonstrated that we will do what is necessary to deliver real results for everyday Americans. We want to avoid a shutdown, but we are also not going to pay the MAGA extremists' ransom demand of jamming parts of Trump's Project 2025 into an appropriations bill and down the throats of the American people.
Can you just lay out some of your top concerns about the SAVE Act, which has been attached to the Senate bill?
It's a voter suppression bill that is simply designed to enact parts of Trump's Project 2025 agenda. Current law is very clear. It's very clear. What is so complicated about the fact that only citizens under the United States Constitution and federal law are permitted to vote in federal elections?
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Now, I want to talk about Amber Thurman, the black woman who died of sepsis after being denied medical care due to Georgia's abortion ban. Now, she was only 28 years old and left behind a young child. She's just one of many who has suffered greatly due to the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision. But what message can you send those who feel hopeless around matters of reproductive freedom?
Yeah, my heartfelt condolences go out to Amber's family. This should never have happened, and it is a direct result of Donald Trump and extreme MAGA Republican efforts to kill the protections of Roe v. Wade and now to pursue a national abortion ban. It's part of their agenda. Their agenda is very clear. The extreme MAGA Republican agenda is very clear. A national abortion ban, Trump's Project 2025, and massive tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and big corporations. That's their agenda. And the hope that the American people should feel on this issue is that as Democrats, led by President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, we believe in a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. We support access to contraception and birth control. We support IVF. The extreme MAGA Republicans do not. And as soon as we have the opportunity to act, House Democrats will swiftly pass the Women's Health Protection Act that will restore the protections of Roe v. Wade and beyond in terms of access to contraception, freedom of movement and travel, as well as access to IVF. This is in the hands of the American people over the next 47 days. And it's clear that the American people stand on the side of reproductive freedom.
Thank you.
Thanks. Chad.
The cap on salt sunsets next year, as it stands right now. If you become speaker, which you certainly want to be, would under any circumstances would you put legislation on the House floor that would either cap in part or in whole salt going forward?
We are committed to making sure we reverse the damage that was done by the extreme MAGA Republicans in connection with the 2017 GOP tax scam, which capped the state and local tax deduction. And for many middle-class families in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Illinois, and California, as well as other parts of the country, all but eliminated the state and local tax deduction in a meaningful way and resulted in tax increases for middle-class families, in some cases by thousands of dollars. The irony of all ironies is that the former president shows up in Nassau County yesterday with House Republicans like Congressman D'Esposito, Elise Stefanik, couldn't even pronounce her name correctly. How much did that hurt? And so many others who were responsible for detonating the state and local tax deduction or have failed to restore it and now want to claim that they're going to come to the rescue. They were the arsonists who burned down the state and local tax deduction, and they have no credibility in trying to pretend right now that they'll be the firefighters. We will work in a bipartisan way to restore the state and local tax deduction. But here's why the November election is so important on this issue. The state and local tax deduction cap will lapse on its own as of December 31st, 2025. It will lapse on its own. No action is required. And so who has the gavels on January 3rd in the 119th Congress will determine whether the state and local tax deduction is restored in full or whether it continues to be capped in a way that hurts middle-class families.
Thanks, you made clear that you want a clean short-term CR, but there's a group of senators that want some emergency relief for natural disasters. There are others who want some emergency funding for the Secret Service. When you say clean, are you willing to accept anything at all, or do you mean it just has to extend for funding as it currently exists?
Yeah, we are open-minded about meeting the needs of the American people in the context certainly of disaster assistance. And we've got to get the Secret Service into a position where its protectees can be shielded in the most maximum way possible from harm. That means President Biden, former President Trump, Vice President Kamala Harris, Governor Tim Walz, Senator J.D. Vance, or anyone else who may fall within the scope of Secret Service protection. In the House, we have a bipartisan task force led ably by Congressman Jason Crow on our side that's working in good faith with House Republicans to assess the situation in terms of the failures to date connected to the Secret Service and to come up with recommendations as to how do we prevent the type of situation, the type of close call that has now occurred with the former president from ever happening again. We're committed to that exploration and turning the situation around with respect to the Secret Service, but I do not want to get out ahead of the bipartisan recommendations from the task force that will be forthcoming.
But disaster relief you could accept on CR?
A disaster relief, I think, is probably ripe for a Four Corners agreement. And that's not to say that addressing the Secret Service is not ripe at this point in time, but that investigation is still ongoing by this bipartisan task force, and they haven't presented any recommendations to us at this particular point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Going back to New York, the former president, as you mentioned, was in the state. New York and California are key to you all winning the majority. You've expressed confidence in the prospects in New York. How confident are you in the work that you and local leaders have done to shore up the state and win back that state after Donald Trump said that not only will House Republicans keep the House, he's going to win New York? Just what's your reaction to that comment, and how confident are you that those seats that Republicans won in 22, you all will win back in 24?
It's a laughable suggestion by the former president, Donald Trump, that he's going to win New York. He will not win New York, and it will not be close. And for the life of me, many of us can't figure out why the so-called swing seat Republicans in New York have tethered themselves so closely to Donald Trump. The explanation is that they've been exposed as extreme MAGA Republicans and have stopped trying to pretend to be moderate because that hasn't worked. And so we under the leadership of Governor Kathy Hochul, and partnership with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, feel as though we are prepared to do what's necessary to make our best possible case to voters in all of the contested congressional elections in New York. Governor Hochul should be commended for leading a significant effort to strengthen the New York State Democratic Party, and in partnership with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who's done an incredible job, stand up a coordinated campaign for the first time in modern New York history that rivals anything that we've seen in battleground states across the country. Thank you. Go back to this side. Yep, you got it.
As folks head home to campaign in a few weeks, what is your message to Democrats about what your legislative agenda would be if you guys won next year?
House Democrats are going to continue to put people over politics and to fight for lower costs, to grow the middle class, and to defend freedom, including a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. We need to take decisive action in the new Congress, partnering with enlightened leadership in the White House and with our colleagues in the Senate to address the housing affordability crisis and lower housing costs for everyday Americans. We need to make sure that those Americans who are struggling to live paycheck to paycheck can get ahead as opposed to simply getting by. And of course, we need to pass the Women's Health Protection Act and the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Act, along with the Freedom to Vote Act, so we can both defend democracy and defend our freedom. Thanks. Go back.
Misinformation is going to be a big issue this campaign cycle, and we've already seen a lot of it. We've seen lies being told about Haitian migrants in Ohio, and we've also seen lies being told about Senator J.D. Vance and a relationship with a couch. Have you had talks with your congressman?
Haven't really followed that couch situation. I've stayed away from that one.
Have you had talks with your conference about being careful about, seeing something online and exasperating it or sharing it?
From our standpoint, we continue to keep the focus on issues related to making a difference in the lives of the American people, lowering costs, addressing the housing affordability crisis, growing the middle class, fighting for reproductive freedom, and defending democracy. We also will contrast that with the Republican agenda, which is a nationwide abortion ban, Trump's Project 2025, and massive tax cuts for big corporations. There's no need for us ever to engage in conspiracy theory peddling or propagating misinformation, because on the issues, Democrats are right and Republicans are wrong. We're still waiting for some clarity from my Republican colleagues as to why they continue to entertain conspiracy theories, attack people in ways that don't relate to issues but relate to people's race or gender or ethnicity or gender identification, as opposed to debating us in the arena of ideas. The reason that many Republicans continue to engage in lies, misinformation, and conspiracy theories is because they have a horrible track record of accomplishment. Can anyone in America name a single thing that House Republicans have done on their own to make life better for the American people? Can anyone name a single thing during the 118th Congress? The answer is no. They have a horrible track record of accomplishment. Instead, they visited chaos, dysfunction, and extremism on the American people. And their vision for the future is deeply unpopular, which is why they're running away from their extreme agenda. But House Republicans can run. We will not let them hide from their desire to impose a nationwide abortion ban, Trump's Project 2025 agenda, or big tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and big corporations. We will not let them hide, and we're going to contest them in the arena of ideas. Thanks. Yep.
Peter Jeffries, I want to follow up on the agenda question because you and other Democrats have been very specific in your critique on the Project 2025 and the Republican agenda. Here today, you did mention some specific bills, but why are Democrats presenting your affirmative agenda for what you would do you get the gavel in November, beyond the Women's Freedom Act and the voting bills? What other specific policy agenda items would you bring to the floor in the first 100 days?
Well, it's a caucus-wide discussion before we can commit to, at this point, what bills will be brought to the floor during the first 100 days. However, I think one thing that is clear is we will lean in to the enhanced and expanded child tax credit so we can be there for working families, middle-class families, and low-income families under the leadership of Rosa DeLauro. We will lean in to lowering housing costs and making sure we address the affordability crisis, and look forward to partnering with the Harris-Walz administration in that regard, who have articulated a clear plan to make sure that rent can be afforded and home ownership opportunities made available to all Americans. And of course, we have to defend freedom and democracy through enactment of the Women's Health Protection Act, Freedom to Vote Act, and John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Thanks.
Can I get your reaction to the explosions we saw in Lebanon this week targeting Hezbollah pagers and walkie-talkies? Do you think this is an escalation by Israel, and what are your thoughts on these attacks?
Yeah, I have not had a secure briefing on the issue yet, and until such time, I'm going to reserve judgment. Israel, of course, has the right to defend itself. There's a special relationship between the United States and Israel. But I also, at the same time, support President Biden and Vice President Harris's efforts to enact a peace plan for Gaza and to de-escalate any tensions that exist in the region in order to avoid an all-out conflict. Last question?
Thanks, Senator Jeffries. A couple weeks ago, the DOJ and the FBI did a big press conference highlighting Russia's efforts to interfere in our elections. Now that we have seen that Iran is also doing the same thing, but seemingly in the favor of the Harris campaign, do you think that the administration or the Harris campaign need to do more to bring attention to that as well? I think so far we've seen maybe a press release, but given that the other situation got so much press and so much attention.
Foreign interference in American elections is unacceptable in any circumstance. That is the Democratic position. It's our hope that that will be the Republican position as well. Thank you.